The words may sound ominous, but keep in mind Donald Trump's statements don't always reflect reality. But he is saying today there is now a framework for a deal on Greenland. No details, though, and nothing, at least not this hour, from Denmark saying whether what Trump said is true. Still, the U.S. president said because of this framework, he will be dropping his tariff threat against 8 European allies. CBC's Katie Nicholson has been following this and joins us live from Washington. Katie, can you tell us more about this framework of a future deal?
Well, Ian, as you say, there are very few concrete details out there, but I'll walk you through what we do know as best as possible, because this is a huge development, very dramatic turn of events from where things were this morning. The Wall Street Journal calling it head spinning. So again, details fuzzy or non-existent, but this is sort of how it went down. So there was that speech this morning in Davos where Trump apparently took military force off the table when it comes to acquiring Greenland. And so that appeared to be the big headline of the day. And then this afternoon, he posted on social media, on Truth Social, that they had this framework of a future deal. So here is part of that post that sort of blew everything open today. Based upon a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. So, Ian, a couple of things to pay attention to there just in that post. If consummated, that language. So obviously this is a deal that is not done, but also big news after that market plunge yesterday that Trump would not be imposing those tariffs on NATO nations. And the market sort of responded in kind to that. But there's really, again, not a lot of details here. It's still apparently very much a deal under discussion or in progress. Though the president did make a few remarks. He was scrummed by reporters briefly. He said it was a deal that was pretty far along. He did briefly answer a few questions. We can listen, but Ian, not promising you a lot of answers here either.
It's a great security, great national and international security. It's a deal that people jumped at. Really fantastic for the USA. Gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? Can you give us some details, please?
Well, the deal is going to be put out pretty soon, and we'll see. It's right now a little bit in progress, but pretty far along. It gets us everything we needed to get. It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position.
And Ian, that was something he kind of kept saying. This is a long-term deal, an infinite deal. Now, Mark Rutte was interviewed by Fox News tonight, and he was asked if Greenland is going to remain with Denmark through this. And Rutte said that issue did not come up in his conversation with Donald Trump. We also heard briefly some words from the Danish foreign minister who was said that he is taking this as a good sign, that talks can now move through normal diplomatic channels, not social media posts. And NATO spokesperson did underscore this evening that NATO allies are discussing this framework, especially the Arctic allies, which of course includes Canada. And that spokesperson said that negotiations between Denmark, Greenland, and the United States are aimed at, quote, ensuring that Russia and China never gain a foothold economically or militarily in Greenland. Of course, at the same time, some pundits here stateside already joking in the U.S. that this is basically a diversionary off-ramp for Trump that was created. They resurrected that phrase taco, that Trump always chickens out. But whatever has sort of happened here, whatever framework of a deal, it appears to have eased tensions somewhat in Europe.
Well, I mean, it's not for NATO to give up Denmark's control over Greenland, right? It has no jurisdiction to do that. It's pretty clear that it hasn't done that. So if, in fact, there is a framework for a deal, there's no indication that it has anything to do with the actual control over Greenland or sovereignty. Anyway, we'll see. Well, these are words from the president.
We need to hear from the Danes, obviously, yes.
Yeah, and yes, we do. And, we don't always take Trump's comments literally, because there's sometimes a gap between what he says and what is actually happening there. I think that's a safe way to put it. Speaking of Trump, he also had some criticism of NATO. What did he say?
Yeah, and not just NATO. He had less than glowing things to say about European nations who make up NATO, that they were going in the wrong direction. He cited things like migration and social spending. But again, Donald Trump repeated something that he said yesterday in the White House, in the press briefing room, during that lengthy briefing. And he had said that the U.S. will always be there for NATO, but he wasn't sure that NATO would be there for the U.S. And he said that again today. And so NATO Secretary General, again, Mark Rutte, he took pains to really sort of talk to Trump about this in front of the press. Here is a little bit of what he said.
There's one thing I heard you say yesterday and today. You were not absolutely sure that the Europeans would come to the rescue of the US if you will be attacked. Let me tell you, they will. And they did in Afghanistan, as you know, for every American who paid the ultimate, for every 2 Americans who paid the ultimate price, there was 1 soldier from another NATO country who did not come back to his family. From the Netherlands, from Denmark, particularly from other countries. So you can be assured, absolutely, if ever the US will be under attack, your allies will be with you. Absolutely, there's an absolute guarantee. I really want to tell you this because it is important. It pains me if you think it is not. And under your leadership, this alliance is stronger than ever.
So a little bit of a refresher there from Mark Rutte about Article 5 being invoked after the 9/11 attacks here on U.S. soil. Also, in that initial speech this morning, Trump talked about his own legacy within NATO and, brought up that he was that key driver of that agreement last year from NATO members to up their defense spending to 5% GDP by 2035. Significant in that there have been worries that all of this insistence on acquiring Greenland, it was really threatening the NATO alliance, in particular those threats to tariff NATO countries. So the speech, while he sort of slammed members of NATO and questioned whether NATO was going to be there, there was no significant remarks there that seemed to indicate that he was going to depart from NATO in any way. And again, like I said, the markets really responded favorably today to that de-escalation around Greenland and those tariffs. And right now, Mark Rutte, he has Trump's ear and perhaps his respect. And that is good news for NATO and Trump's and the U.S. administration's continued involvement in it.
It was a fascinating clip, Katie. I don't think I've ever seen someone with the demeanor Rutte had speaking to Trump, basically setting him straight, and Trump just sitting there listening to it. It was fascinating to watch. CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Juno Berthelsen is a Greenlandic member of parliament. He's joining us now from Nuuk to weigh in on these latest developments out of Davos. Juno, thank you very much for joining us here in Canada. Trump said, as you know, that he's reached a framework for an Arctic deal with NATO. Do you think that's true?
Well, first, thank you for having me on your show, Ian. We're very excited and look forward to see what exactly is being meant by having had this framework kind of worked out. But it's important to say that the Greenlandic people is a sovereign people. We've been seeing that from world leaders from Europe. And it's important to center the Greenlandic people in this conversation. And this is about the Greenlandic people, our country, our homeland. And what comes out of this, we're very excited to see and look forward to see where this goes from here. But the best thing that we can draw from this is that they've chosen to go down a diplomatic route, which is something that we've been advocating for and pushed for a long time. So we're happy to see that.
Do you know if Denmark or Greenland have been consulted on this potential agreement?
We have had no information whatsoever. So. And that's why I'm saying that we look forward to what is actually meant by the statements that we've seen now regarding Greenland. It's important to say that the Greenland, Greenland belongs to the Greenlandic people, and the Greenlandic people and our representatives need to be in conversations regarding the sovereignty of Greenland. So again, we're looking forward to see what's exactly in this framework, and we need to see what it exactly is meant.
What puzzles me, and we don't have a lot of detail, and we haven't had a lot of time since Donald Trump made these comments, and the comments weren't part of his speech, they were sort of off the cuff after his meeting with the head of NATO. But what puzzles me is what kind of agreement could he reach with NATO? And I was just saying to our reporter, I can't imagine a scenario. Well, NATO just doesn't have the jurisdiction to give anyone, much less the United States, control over Greenland. So are you fairly confident that we're not talking about control over Greenland?
As you said, of course, NATO doesn't have any jurisdiction when it comes to sovereignty of either Denmark or Greenland. So again, we're just looking forward to see what exactly is meant by this framework that's being mentioned. But I don't want to go into too much into speculation. A lot of media are already doing that, speculating what it could contain and what it means to have this framework in place. But it's important to point out that we do need to be at the table whenever we're talking about the sovereignty of Greenland. The Greenlandic people needs to be at the center of this conversation because it is our homelands that we're talking about.
Yeah, one of the things I find really interesting, and I appreciate you talking to us, is I think you said you're excited to get the details. So you're not dreading the details, you're not anxious about the details, you're actually excited. And at the same time, you talk about the importance of sovereignty for Greenlanders. So that makes me think that even if you don't want to speculate publicly, you have a pretty good sense that no one here is talking about Greenlanders losing control of their island.
Well, again, we can use many different words. I think feelings are people might be very relieved to hear the words that we've seen today and the statements from Trump that no force is going to be used, because that has been very vivid and present here in Greenland, where our the population has been centering a lot around this rhetoric that's been creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear in some places. But we've been adamant in believing that diplomatic dialogue and solutions and a diplomatic outcome could lead us to a better place. And that's why I'm using these words to kind of convey the message that from Greenland, we are looking for peaceful solutions. We need to use diplomacy. We're a peaceful people. We've been here for thousands of years. We're going to be here for thousands of years more. This is our homelands. We know nothing about war. We've never been a warmongering people. So the choice to go down a diplomatic route is something that is a very positive outcome as I see it right now.
Juno, one last thing. We have less than a minute, but it's a question I've asked all the Greenlanders that I've had the privilege of interviewing over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Canada is watching now. Canada is about to open a consulate in Nuuk. What message do you have for the people of Canada?
Well, we want to build relations with the countries around us. We've been focusing for many years on trying to figure out how we can build on the partnerships and the cooperation between Greenland and the rest of North America. We are on the North American continent. So there are advantages in terms of pursuing how we can have different partnerships built out, whether it be trade or investment or just cultural exchange or whatever we can find that could benefit both our people. So we're excited to see that Canada is going to open a consulate and that we can have more direct dialogue with future partners in a future Greenlandic independent Greenlandic scenario.
Juno Berthelsen is a Greenlandic member of Parliament, joining us live from Nuuk. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.